listen-only mode.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
They're muted.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. This is our first webinar that we are going to participate in for asset management. Are you guys hearing?
Sounds like you have two microphones on.
I am. I'm moving away from our. Is that better?
Okay.
As we work through some of the
Yes.
glitches. Okay. So I apologize for that. I've stepped away from our office to avoid that. So thank you for, this is our first of 4 series that we are going to be hosting in our offices, and we appreciate you guys and your interest in talking. Our first speaker today is Jeff Stillman, and he is our national lead for asset management. And we are going to be taking questions. Everybody will be on mute at the beginning of the session, and then we will open up the lines by office and take questions. So you can either type them in, write them down, give them to your facilitator, and we will answer those as we go. And at the end of it, we will also be following up with each of you to provide a certificate for your one credit hour of contact. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and start the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Diane, and hello, everybody. Sorry I can't see you, but I'm just going to talk through the presentation, and like Diane said, if you have any questions, just type them in and send them, and we can cover the questions at the end. So the talk today is going to be about challenges and opportunities in implementing an asset management program. And really I want to talk about 3 different things. The first is just giving a little bit of an overview about some of the strategic directions reports that we do on an annual basis for the U.S. water industry. And then I've broken it out into separate discussions on the challenges and the opportunities. But as you can probably imagine, with each challenge there is an opportunity, and with each opportunity there may be challenges as well. So there's a little bit of overlap as we go through each of the points in the presentation. The first topic is the strategic directions in the U.S. water industry. So I don't know if everybody's familiar, but I imagine many of you have received the strategic directions report. It's an annual report that we do as Black Veatch for the water industry. And generally what we do is send out a questionnaire to a broad base of utilities. And we usually get something on the order of 300 to 400 responses. So it's a pretty good cross-section across various regions and various sizes of utilities. And the questionnaire is just meant to get a pulse on what's happening in the industry and where the industry is. On the asset management front in recent years, we see actually a consistent trend that a lot of utilities expect to be good practice asset management in 3 years. But usually as it's rolling, it's usually a rolling 3 years out. So if we took the 2013 survey, everybody should be good practice by next year, basically. So, but that is just kind of an interesting thing. So I think as people get up on the maturity curve of asset management, they realize that there's more to do is basically what's happening. Just to go through some of the results of the report, I thought it was relatively interesting. We asked what are the top 10 issues in the water industry, and the top one was aging water and sewer infrastructure. But if you look down the list of the next 9 or 10, almost all of them are related in one way or another to asset management. So there are a lot of issues that can be addressed with an asset management program, and that gets into the definition of asset management, which I won't go into the introductory type stuff, but basically asset management is more than just doing a likelihood and consequence of failure on your assets and getting a BRE and projecting the costs into the future. It's really about getting everything to work together properly so that you're properly maintaining your assets. This is the trend curve that shows the blue line is our current stage, and the green is where people expect to be 3 years from now. So each point along the curve is showing a different level of maturity or understanding of asset management. And this is from each utility's response on where they expected to be in the process. So this gets at the notion of within 3 years, 75% or so expect to be very good or excellent in understanding and implementing asset management. So it's definitely a high priority for many utilities. Next item was looking at what are the activities that are most important in implementing your asset management program right now. And you can see by far it was developing the required systems and processes needed to improve asset management. There are some activities in terms of defining asset management, getting senior management buy-in. Interestingly, the lack of asset data showed up very low, the lowest of the options. And lack of asset management capabilities was low as well. So it's really about starting to work with the data that you've got to make sure that you're getting what you need out of your asset management program. And finally, to close out the discussion on the survey, we asked about what tools are in place to support your asset management or even other systems as well. And so you can see we have a list of tools, and it almost goes in order of, it's almost maturity scale from top to bottom. In terms of most utilities have in place a GIS system. So blue and green is generally, you have the system in place and it's in use and it's used effectively. Maybe there's a little room for improvement. But as you go down the list and start to get, especially towards the paperless work order management system, mobile applications, enterprise management software, you're getting less and less application and less development of these things. So that's getting more and more towards the cutting edge until you get to deterioration models, and many people don't even know exactly what's involved in a deterioration model yet. And just to give a quick answer to that, that's really a means of looking at your failure history and projecting based on your whatever program that you have, what is the failure record going to be in the future so that you can meet your levels of service in the future. And it's a way of saying, is your program adequate in a more definitive way than just having a qualitative scoring system. So some common challenges and really what I've done is just tried to pick the top 4 challenges and the top 4 opportunities that I see on a daily or monthly basis with many different clients. And whether it's people that we're doing projects for, or man, we just can't get started because we got to get some other stuff done first. And so I want to talk a little bit about each of these. And the first one is going to be data sufficiency, then inadequate resources to get the job done, resistance to change. People just don't want to do the extra tasks that are required, or operational silos in terms of sharing data or just having different responsibilities so that you have overlapping or competitive groups going in different directions. So first challenge to talk about is the data sufficiency. And this there's a little bit of a balancing act here, and you can look at it in multiple ways. Here we've got, are you all hard copy, maps and things in the library, or do you have a sophisticated computer system that's interlinked and you can do everything online and access the data that you need, which is generally where people want to go, but it can be very expensive to get there, and it can almost paralyze you thinking that you need to get everything just right before you get started collecting data. And that's why I say planning versus paralysis. When you undertake a program, you want to have a plan in place to collect the right data, make sure that you're getting the right information. But if you spend so much time planning, you end up getting nothing done, and you're never going to have all the answers up front. There's usually an adjustment and an evolution in implementing the program. So I would generally be of the camp of it's best to get started with what you've got and make steps forward. But if you're going to spend a good deal of money on any one program, like an inspection program, then it's good to do a little bit of planning ahead to make sure that you are collecting the right data for that larger program. But don't get in a paralyzed mode just because you don't know everything that needs to be done up front. So, and looking at what the ideal world is, you've got your computerized maintenance management system. In this case, it's Maximo. You throw in a lot of sophisticated data and monitoring information, and then it's the computer program just spits out everything you need: the preventive maintenance, the corrective maintenance work orders, gives you a list of the rehab needs and the timing for those needs. I don't think anybody's there yet. But this is what everybody wants, basically, is the system that will do it for you, that will account for all of the data. Some of the software vendors are promising that, but it's really not there in terms of being able to do everything. And each software program has its strengths and weaknesses, basically, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But in reality, what you've got is the information systems are, they're a tool to support asset management, basically, and to support other things as well. But you might have information in different forms throughout your whole department or utility. They might be paper copies for maps and record drawings, might be digital work orders in some cases and not others, may have paper O&M manuals. Meanwhile, you've got CCTV or other inspection data in a completely different application. You've got your GIS, your hydraulic model. The question is, to what extent can each of these communicate with each other? And you want to be looking for a consistent ID system so that you can relate one thing to another. And when you're setting it up, if you're transitioning from paper to digital, those are the keys. It's getting a consistent ID system and having a consistent filing structure, essentially. So you have a consistent place and consistent naming convention. If you have, for example, hyperlinks to a CCTV video, you want to have those in a permanent place so that you can have permanent hyperlinks that don't get messed up if you change a file or move things, basically. But you can do it based on the maturity level of any given information system that you have. You might be able to link a couple of these up much more efficiently and more quickly without trying to do the whole thing at once. Because, like I said, the software systems can promise a lot, but really none of them really provide everything, and not everything that they promise even. Because the sales pitches can be really good, but the data has to be perfect in order for the software to work perfectly. And I don't think I've seen a set of perfect data yet, basically. So just because there's a demo doesn't mean it's going to be easy to implement these software packages. But then when you look at the software packages, they're just a tool to get things done. I've seen commonly a lot of people say, oh, we're going to do asset management, we've got Lucity, or something like that. And none of these packages are actually asset management. They're just something to support it. They can help with establishing work processes and collecting data to support asset management. But in every single case, to do good asset management, to take it out and get really proper planning, take it out to budgeting, you generally have to take it out of these software packages and do additional analysis or summary someplace else. It might just be in Excel, or it might be a more sophisticated application like Riva, or Bentley has some products and things that support reliability-centered maintenance as well. So don't confuse asset management with software. Just as one example of kind of getting going, we've actually worked with Trinity River Authority for 25 years now, doing the planning studies on a regular basis for each of their basins, implementing the Lucity software, implementing ArcGIS, and they actually use Maximo at the plants and for financial. So that's more at the enterprise or at the plant level. And we're working with them on Maximo now, but our history is more with the Lucity system. And what we did there was they had a good incremental approach of step by step. They decided that for the collection system, which is really a large interceptor system, that Lucity was going to be the primary repository of data. it would draw information from the GIS for the mapping data, but it would be used as the medium for bringing in inspection data, work order history, managing and accessing documents, manhole inspections, CCTV footage. Everything was going to be channeled through Lucity. So step by step, they did each of these almost as a separate project, essentially, to get it straight, get it in there, and then their operations department was one step further along in having the data that they needed. They didn't try to do it all in one project because it did take time to get each piece of data together to make it work. But over time, they have a very effective system now. And they needed to relate the information from Lucity to Maximo. So we actually developed another application to push work orders from Lucity to Maximo so that the finance group could summarize the information. So it's a step-by-step process. You can get little bits to get you what you need at a given time frame and then just continue to mature. But you can actually have a very functional system pretty quickly and really just improve it over time. So challenge number 2 was inadequate resources. I hear a lot of stories about firefighting. Hopefully it's not this bad. But commonly it's the leaks and addressing the issues on a day-to-day basis and just getting out and addressing things. We don't have time to get data into the system right and worry about data collection. We don't have time to do proactive maintenance and all these things. But if you want to do asset management, you have to have a little bit of extra resources just to get ahead of the curve. But there are certainly steps that you can take even as part of reactive maintenance just to be collecting the data that you need while you're at site, and it doesn't take a whole lot of extra time. So in a way, this can also just be a cultural issue of blaming inadequate resources when there are small steps that will get you in the right direction still. And this is where a stepwise approach, very similar to what I just described for TRA, comes into play. You don't have to do it all at once. It's very expensive to do it all at once. And it's actually also risky to do it all at once because you might change what you want the outcome to be as you learn more about the process. So it really does make sense to go in a step-by-step fashion. This is a method that we used for one client, or actually for several clients in North Carolina. But there's also the EPA 10-step method. There are different step-by-step processes to getting the data that you need and advancing in your asset management calculations so that you can get a good risk-based prioritization of your assets and your programs, basically. One example of doing the stepwise approach and having inadequate resources was Forsyth County, Georgia, who we're currently working with on a gap assessment and program development. They are a very lean organization. They're one of the fastest growing counties in the U.S. Over the past few years. It's slowed down in very recent years, but it's picking up again. And they're currently kind of going through some of the growing pains of going from a smaller utility to a larger utility, just passing that 100,000 customer mark, and figuring out that they need to have some more processes in place, but they're still running themselves like as a very tight-knit group. So it's a neat organization to work with. The gap assessment, they decided that they wanted to do a gap assessment so that they could see what they needed to do and then focus on the priorities. And coming out of that, they decided getting an asset renewal forecast, and they have many basic information in place to do that, and they'll continue to improve the sophistication of that over time. But getting a good renewal forecast in place was top priority. Then getting engineering processes, interestingly, was another priority because they expect to have a big improvements program coming up as growth picks up again. So they want to have good processes in place to manage that. And then finally, the CMMS, their computerized maintenance management system, needs to be updated. And so they're actually looking at procuring a different system at this point in time. So those are the top 3 priorities that they decided to focus on. And they'll do each of those in a step-by-step fashion as well. And getting to the firefighting mode, they decided actually to, as part of going out and doing work orders on the sewer system, they developed a simple data collection app for the GIS. It's just a very simple form interface, but anytime that they're out at a manhole, they can open that up and do a quick inspection of it. And so they can just collect the inspection data as part of the routine work that they're doing. And that way they can get a handle on their system without really having to go out and invest extra resources on it. Challenge number 3 is resistance to change. I think this one speaks pretty much for itself. Everybody's familiar with the people that really just fight against any change in the system. They like doing business as usual, like to have their routines, or feel overwhelmed and don't want to have to take on additional workload. Nobody wants to do pointless work. And so that's one key to think about in terms of it, is what is the purpose of collecting this data or of doing the asset management work, and really communicating why that's important and showing the benefits of the activity so that there's actually a tangible benefit to the operations crews or to whoever is being asked to do the additional work. Don't just have it feed in excuse me, don't just have it feed into the maintenance management system so that they feel like they're feeding the beast and never getting any benefit from them. Most of the current systems out there have dashboards, so you can use it to manage your workload, your work order flow, to prioritize work orders. And as people collect data, you can actually get much better information about your system so that they can do their work more efficiently in the future and know what the conditions are before they go out to the site. And so one example of that is Winston-Salem, where they have CCTV trucks, but they've really just had a find and fix policy of running CCTV for a long time. So they ended up with a room full of videotapes and DVDs, but generally they didn't do anything with that data. If they had a system to just import the defect data and the footage of that data, you can take that database and link it to your GIS and end up with a map like we have here, where from manhole to manhole you can see the location of each defect that's noted in the logs. So it's not doing any additional work for the crews. They're already logging the defects and things, but it's a matter of making sure that that data is used, pulled into the system, and now when they get a work order on a pipe, or if there's an issue, they can open this up before going out, see that the pipe is in bad shape, know the material of the pipe, and know what needs to be done. So it was a nice win-win thing where they were very happy to have this in place, basically, after putting it into effect. Sustainable change is a journey, and this is a very complicated figure, so I'm going to give a little bit to absorb it. Really, this came out of some work that we did with Sydney Water in Australia. But if the green part of the graph is looking at maintenance and spare parts, and it goes from very high level of effort and decreases down to the over time on the right side. Meanwhile, the blue side is increasing, reflecting an increase in reliability and performance. So the transition to asset management and sustainability is really going from a reactive mode where you just get in and repair it, fix things when it's break, make it as good as it was before. But as you get more information, put more effort into trying to get predictive about it, you do proactive and preventive maintenance, and then at some point you have a good deal of data to work with, so that the systems actually become a valuable tool, and information itself becomes an asset, and people start to recognize that. And that's when you start to hit that rising side of the curve, because now you can look at repairs and start to think of them as, make the repairs as good as new, do proactive and predictive maintenance, make maintenance a part of the supply chain, and really start to focus on the life cycle reliability. So it's just a transition in maturity in asset management. For Sydney Water, this happened, which is a very large utility, by the way. This happened over a period of about 5 years for that transition. Challenge number 4, well, it's your typical water and sewer org chart, right? Many people are, I think most people would be familiar with this. There are some organizations that actually are pretty effective at not having very large silos or very separate operations. But just one example of this is Tulsa, and Tulsa is going to be a consistent case study for a lot of the rest of the presentation. But Tulsa is set up as they have the City of Tulsa and the Tulsa Metropolitan Utility Authority, which runs the water and wastewater systems. The TMUA, the authority, actually has no staff, though. They have the board and one secretary. And so the city is actually contracted out to do the work for the authority. So it's kind of an interesting arrangement there. And the Water and Sewer Department is tasked with operations and management of the system, as well as rehab, unless it's a large capital rehab project. And Engineering Services is generally responsible for capital projects and planning. Both of them actually view themselves as the ultimate stewards of the system. And both of them accept responsibility for performance. So what ends up happening is, or what has ended up happening in the past, we're changing that process now, is Engineering Services would come up with a capital improvements program. It might get delayed in implementing that program, and the Water and Sewer Department would be nervous that projects wouldn't get implemented in time when they had deteriorating equipment. So often what would happen is they would actually replace a major piece of equipment in advance of a capital improvement project, and then it would become an exercise of figuring out if you could implement that or use that equipment still in the revised project, or if it was just something that was done as an emergency measure. So it's very inefficient, basically, and there was some communication between the departments, but that was mostly on an individual basis, basically. It depended on individual relationships, and otherwise there wasn't necessarily a lot of communication, and certainly not enough. What we've been doing, we're working on, it's called the Utility Enterprise Initiative. I won't talk at great length about it, but we're working on a number of management and asset management functions to get the TMUA services running more smoothly, basically. And one of them was really building a bridge between the Engineering Services and the Water and Sewer Department. And the way we did that was by developing an asset management committee. And this really includes the chief engineer and the head of water and sewer, as well as a new asset manager. And then there's a finance manager and an information systems manager. So we took them, made that the core asset management committee. They now have regular meetings on a monthly basis during much of the year, and twice a month during the intense capital planning and budgeting season. The Asset Management Committee is responsible for approving all significant projects, basically, and so that's the way of getting that interface between the capital projects and the rehab projects. We also implemented an IT systems work group to get more cohesive interaction between not just Engineering Services and the Water and Sewer, but actually with the Information Systems Department and other city groups, because a major part of the program is to get a good performance management system and to link the information systems across the different departments and be able to roll up reporting to the board to get good performance measures and link that to levels of service ultimately. So that's just one method of building a bridge. The key is to figure out ways to break down the silos and get better communication between the divisions. Moving on to the common opportunities. 4 opportunities that I identified and see on a regular basis is maximize your existing programs. I'll talk about it in more depth, but basically you probably have a lot of programs in place that would be an excellent part of an asset management program, and you don't need to start from scratch. Build on what you've got that might seem like a no-brainer, but I see a lot of people starting from scratch on the asset management programs because they just want to recreate things. And it takes a lot of effort, and it actually makes change much more difficult because there's a lot more resistance to it ultimately. Next one is building on strong practices. Very similar, but you may have a well-advanced group or activity that you can use to help kickstart and get some quick wins in the program to get enthusiasm going. So that's the distinction there. Next is to do an assessment and prioritization of your program and to track progress. So to get a framework so that you're moving towards a common goal across your whole work group, and you don't have people working potentially in conflict or at least independently and in different directions. So having a good plan in place is what that is. So opportunity number one is identifying cost and efficiency savings. I'll talk about Tulsa as an example. We've implemented a risk-based assessment process to identify the risk of different capital projects on risk and benefit basically, and weighted the risks based on what happens if you don't do a project, if you let the asset run to fail, or just maintain it over its life, as opposed to implementing a project to actually rehab or replace it or do some other mitigating measure. And the ultimate graph that comes out of that really is shown in optimizing it. This is for the wastewater system, where each of these is a stacked bar chart for the 4 different wastewater treatment plants, as well as a general component, and then SOM is the sewer operations and maintenance, which you can see is a large piece of the budget, and it's probably the most in need of rehab when you look at the run to failure because of deteriorating pipes and things. So we compare the run to failure with and do an optimization routine, and basically it looks like a 252 to 247 million, which isn't a great reduction, but that's actually a risk-weighted cost. So what that's saying is, on a present value basis, the city was being a little too conservative, and we can actually reduce the overall risk-weighted costs, take on some risk by deferring some investment, and actually what ended up happening is that deferral really resulted in $20 million of savings by pushing outside of the CIP time frame, and sometimes much more than the CIP time frame, to get that $5 million in risk-weighted costs. So the $20 million benefit is actually a fairly significant benefit that is going to show up in their rates over the long term as a benefit and help keep the rates stable over time. So the way they've done this and implemented it as a process is they've actually have a schedule and a stepwise process throughout the year, where for each project that's identified, so this might be identified in operations or in engineering, but each project is going to have a proponent basically that brings the project forward and has to fill out a pretty basic justification sheet that has a very simple estimate of the cost and the benefit of the project, but it's really just to get it on the roadmap and to throw it into the hopper basically for consideration. Those projects then move up and get screened to determine which ones actually receive a business case evaluation. And the business case evaluation is where a team generally looks at a group of projects at a time, because there's going to be a lot of overlapping responsibilities between the teams. But look at what is the real benefit of doing the project? What risks does it mitigate? What are the costs of that project going to be over time, and calculating the life cycle costs, calculating or trying to estimate the cost of failure if a failure should occur. And that's more than just the repair costs. It's going to be the economic damage and things as well. So that's what is the business case that then goes into the modeling and the optimization to get the results that I just showed. And so the next step is obviously doing that modeling and prioritization. And there's a little bit of an iterative process. You do the modeling prioritization and then do the review workshop, which is kind of a reality check with the Asset Management Committee, and that might send us back to the drawing board to do a little bit more modeling. So it can be a cyclical process between those two steps. But after the CIP is essentially finalized in the engineering and water and sewer departments, that's when it can go up to the rate modeling, and it reaches the board level at that point for discussion, and that's also potentially iterative cycle depending on what the acceptable level of risk to the utility is, because we now have risk costs, and what the acceptable rate increase is. So the board now has the information to make that decision and help balance that choice and work on that decision and the balance with the engineering services director and the water and sewer director. I won't go into detail on this, but this is the process that we go through in the actual modeling. So there are input forms for the business cases. There's a financial template that we develop that then balances in the financial template. Each project is compared to identify the projects that essentially yield the greatest bang for the buck. And there's the probability element to it, which is why we have a Monte Carlo simulation as well, because you don't know, when something is going to break for sure. So you say, well, it might break by then, but it's almost certainly going to be break a little bit further down the road, so that you can have a little bit of variation in that model there. And then the outputs of the financial model are taken to actually schedule the project optimally, and that's a genetic algorithm process. So this is a pretty sophisticated tool. There are all levels of tools up to this level. This is probably about as sophisticated as it gets. But you can do a lot of this process in a very straightforward manner in a spreadsheet. And in many cases, that'll be adequate. So I'm not saying that you have to go to this level of detail every time, but it is pretty effective, especially for larger utilities and larger capital improvements programs. Another output of doing that analysis is you can actually prioritize your CIP such that you can actually see what is the risk-weighted or the total portfolio risk, and are you implementing projects that will reduce the risk at the maximum rate over time, meaning are you getting the best bang for the buck with each project. And you can break out these same bar charts on a project-by-project basis, so that you can see the regulatory, financial, safety, customer service, or financial, and adjust the weightings as you see fit. But so these are the weightings that Tulsa decided on. Tried to operate more like a business. That's why they have a financial, a very strong financial component. But it was really by reorganizing the projects and shifting these projects out later that have very low risk benefits. Just deferring those out because they were determined not to be as essential. Basically, that was the process. Okay, opportunity number 2 is align your asset management program with existing programs to get the quick win. And I really want to focus on that quick win, because it's the quick wins and the alignment with the programs that makes it more efficient with the alignment of existing programs, and the quick wins are just proven time and again to increase enthusiasm. When one group sees another group benefiting from having a system in place, they want it. Or when one group is getting projects approved because they can show the benefits of the project, and the other group is having problems because they can't show it as definitively, that's when they realize that they really need it and that there is a benefit to these programs. So this is just kind of a schematic showing, hey, you probably have various elements of an asset management program in place already. You might not call them asset management plans, but you probably have a lot of plans that are going to be very valuable as part of an asset management plan if you just bring them together. You might not have a strategy written down, but you probably have some idea of it. You might not have a formal condition assessment program, but you've probably done some condition assessment. So each of these you might have at a different level of maturity. The key is to align them, bring it together so you have a good solid foundation for your asset management program. Make sure that they're working together. That's all it is. It's not trying to push a whole new framework on you. It's really about getting the pieces that you have to work together better and maybe identifying some stuff that you haven't been doing adequately enough previously. And that's the point of doing a gap assessment, to figure out and really codify what you have and figure out a way of getting it to work together. One example of the quick win, and this was actually really early in the Tulsa project. It was back when we were doing the comprehensive assessment, which actually led to the Utility Enterprise Initiative. The comprehensive assessment was really a facilities master plan. And as just an extra task on that, we saw that the wastewater treatment plant group had a tool in place that was like the WRF Simple, the Water Environment Research Foundation. They have a spreadsheet method that does likelihood and consequence of failure. Very straightforward, simple method that you can use to get the business risk exposure to help prioritize your rehab and replacement. And they were using this for budgeting, but the problem was they had a separate spreadsheet for each treatment plant. And this, people were inserting rows and columns into the spreadsheets. The spreadsheet wasn't totally lined up with the maintenance management system. They tried to do it, but it kind of diverged over time. And you had different people that were using it a little bit differently. So it was very hard to do the reconciliation and get a good prioritization at the end of the year towards budgeting time. And it was very frustrating because it could take a couple weeks to pull that information together. But they knew it was valuable and they knew they wanted to use it. So what we did was we actually pulled those spreadsheets into a database so that it was more form-driven, and that way it was less susceptible to manipulation or introduction of errors by different users. And it provided consistency. It also provided for an automatic link with the maintenance management system, which was Antero. And we also implemented a means of, with each work order, you could update the condition assessment of the asset so that you actually had a more up-to-date, more real-time condition assessment to feed into the prioritization model. So by doing these linkages, it was a fairly straightforward process. We were able to pull the information together, save a lot on the level of effort at the end of year budgeting, or beginning of year budgeting as maybe, and get the benefit of the tools that they already had in place. So with that, they made a good leap forward and were really able to justify their projects to the board, and that actually became a driving impetus for the board to want to implement a broader asset management program across the utility, because they saw the benefits of this prioritization and of the tool and of the linkage and wanted to see that applied on a broader scale. So that was really the quick win that launched the whole program. Opportunity number 3 is identify strong practices and build on those. So the Tulsa example is a perfect example of that, but there are other possibilities as well. And so I just wanted to give one quick example of work we're doing with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District. They've started the 2050 facilities plan, and the outcome, it's kind of a change in philosophy of trying to do the facilities plan as part of an asset management program and really kicking off the program and taking it to a new level. And that means each asset type or each working section, basically collection system, water courses, treatment plants, is going to be a separate asset management plan. But the master plan is going to be developed as an asset management plan and have risk-based prioritization, capital prioritization, and really one of the ultimate goals, and we're well on the way to having that in place, is a hierarchical structure to relate each asset and each asset type up to the overall service level of the whole district. And that's what the hierarchy here is shown. By having a triple bottom line system to provide an overall measure of performance that relates to the organizational objectives, and a level lower than that is the levels of service, where we can define some of the lower level objectives, performance indicators, and then targets. So what really helped us get this further along and get a good system in place was that they didn't just have a CMOM program. They'd put a good deal of effort into the CMOM program previously and tried to take on the philosophy that, well, CMOM should be more than just the sewer system. And what I'm talking about here is the performance indicators especially. They decided that instead of just monitoring a lot of the typical CMOM performance indicators, they would extend some of that monitoring to other areas of the district besides just the collection system. So they had a pretty well-established set of performance indicators that they've been tracking over time. Now, we had to add some additional performance indicators to help with asset management, but they really had a good history and a good solid foundation to build on that really made this whole process much more straightforward than it often is. This can be a challenge to get full alignment in the organization, and it's gone quite smoothly for them. Finally, opportunity number 4 is to implement a framework. And by framework, I mean there's a concept of what are the elements of an asset management system. And you can say asset management program, system. And again, I don't mean the software. I mean the overall management structure and the alignment of resources, including information systems, but including staff and skills and things to make sure that you have everything you need to be doing the asset management right. That's what the framework is. And so having a good plan is just going to make sure that everybody's in alignment and moving towards the same goals, and you can identify the priorities and see benefits a little bit faster. Yes, it's a little bit of effort to go to the effort of a gap assessment and building a roadmap, but once you have a roadmap, that's something that you can go back to over time and track your progress and make sure that you're doing things as you desire and that you're seeing the benefits that you want out of it. This is back to the Tulsa example. This is an example of the initial assessment, which is the red inner circle. That was, they just decided that they wanted to do the program, so we decided to start out with PAS 55, which is publicly available specification number 55. It was the UK standard. That is actually a standard that's being phased out, and it's being replaced by ISO 55000, which is a broader international standard that you may have heard of. And so Tulsa is actually transitioning, or has transitioned to the ISO 55000 standard, but I'm just showing one of the older figures here for comparison. But the ISO 55000 has a very similar radar plot. So just to help you get your bearings here a little bit, the radar plot is basically each score is plotted radially from the center out to the far end on a 0 to 4 scale. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, where 3 in both ISO 55000 and PAS 55 is considered competence or good practice asset management. So that's the level that's required for certification. That's commonly the target, but there is no real requirement for certification. So you can pick your own targets, really. We just like it as a framework to make sure that you're looking at it holistically. But then on each spoke of the wheel is a different section of the standard. So if you start out at 12 o'clock, the first couple hours essentially are the high-level things like the policy, strategy, and objectives. And as we work around, we're generally working through the life cycle of the asset management process to some extent, and through some supporting elements as well. So a big area is risk management, which is down on the 4 to 6 o'clock range. There are several elements of risk management. things like legal requirements, and if you progress around to the 10, 11 o'clock area, then you're into audit and review. So it's like you get to the things of assessing that your program is working and looking at continual improvement to improve on what you've done. So that's a very important part. It's not just about achieving the standard and then, yep, we did it, put it on the bookshelf. It's about having the process in place to keep doing it year in and year out. Oh, I guess the thing I didn't mention was that the roadmap that they have in a conceptual form is going from the red, so that after year 1 they wanted to have the green line, and actually we did achieve that. And year 2 they would shift some of the priorities and obtain the purple line. We're actually in progress of doing that and coming up on the year 2 mark and making good progress there. And then finally, year 3 was a 3-year plan to achieve certification. That translates to an action plan that is actually in Microsoft Project, and this is just a kind of a spreadsheet conceptualization of it, but where we have task numbers, initiative names, and then a Gantt chart showing the implementation schedule, basically. And when you're first setting up the priorities to get the Gantt chart together, we actually have a ranking to help prioritize, and this is based on management decision and discussion. And then the dependencies is that last column to see, are we doing stuff in the right order? Does it make sense? And then you can move based on the cost to implement each initiative. You can stagger it over time. So even with a stepwise approach, it's very useful to have this in place to help prioritize your activities and figure out what's going to give you the benefit that you really want to get. So in implementing their program, we've just gone through step by step, working around that radial dial. So that one of the first things was getting a distinct buy-in from the board, basically, and distinct direction. So we implemented an asset management policy that was signed by the chairman of the board and the water and sewer director. It includes the mission, principles, commitment to the regulations, and helping define the levels of service, and a commitment to continual improvement. And this is just kind of saying, yes, we want to do it, and we are fully behind it, understanding what it takes. And that it really helps to have that senior management buy-in, because asset management programs that I've seen where people are trying to push it up, like the lone engineer that doesn't have a whole lot of authority but's trying to push it, doesn't. Sometimes they make some good progress, but it can be very challenging without good upper management support. Next step was building a framework, and so this is their depiction of how everything fits together. It's a little bit different for each utility with a lot of similar elements. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it's a helpful well, this is the schematic of it, but they actually have a document that breaks it out into descriptions of the different sections and things so that people can come in and understand what the asset management program is if they're just starting, understand what's available, what some of the processes and procedures are. So it's a very helpful document when you think of staff turnover and retirements on the horizon. Strategy and objectives. Again, this is a busy slide, but it's just an example cut out of the strategy where they actually have a set of objectives and tactics defined over several pages in strategy. To help piece it together, this is very closely related to the roadmap and maybe at a little bit higher level. But it helps say what the goals are, what the intent is, and what they plan to achieve. And finally, probably the biggest element of their program is actually the asset management information systems implementation. They had a number of maintenance management systems that were used in varying degrees of sophistication. I think they had 6 different systems across 4 different sections, so they actually had multiple systems in use in some sections of the utility. They just decided that it was not fit for purpose. They needed to go to a single platform, or at a minimum go to 2 platforms, one for the collection and distribution systems and one for the water and wastewater treatment systems, so there could be some consistency. Ultimately, they decided to go with Lucity. In the selection process, it was quite involved. Developed a close collaboration with the staff and among the staff to get a good scope and to review the proposals as a broader team to get input from all the working sections. And we really got good buy-in that everybody was on board with Lucity, and they're proceeding with the implementation in a stepped process now, going section by section and sometimes treatment plant by treatment plant as well. So that's in process at the moment. So just to conclude, asset management is evolving. There's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of challenges in implementing an asset management program. Because asset management is evolving and the understanding of asset management is changing across the U.S. and across the world, don't get hung up on perfection. I've seen a lot of people get stymied right in the beginning trying to get everything just right. It is an evolution, and the best thing is to move with what you've got, continue to improve it. Build on your strengths, implement the program in steps, and make a plan and track the progress. So with that, I'd be happy to field any questions. Hopefully I wasn't completely disconnected and talking to thin air. Anybody there?
Can you guys hear me?
Ooh. A few hundred times.
Okay, is that better?
Much better.
Can folks hear me?
I can. Others might still be figuring out how to take themselves off mute.
Hello.
One muted.
Can you guys hear me? I'm good. So we're going to do this. If each of your offices can mute for the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to go around to each office and offer you an opportunity to ask questions. And we're going to start with the Bingham Farms office. So Bob Harper, and if you could go ahead and ask questions.
Just if you that's going to be very good.
I knew most of Michigan, but I got yeah.
Well, we can. Angela, can you hear me? Hello? So let's try this. Bob Harvard, can you hear me?
I'm here.
I have totally shut my computer down, and it's not even in the same room, but we're still getting feedback, and we're not able to hear. No, individual offices.
It may be one of the other locations that also has two going because you're asking them to speak next to a computer as well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
in each of the offices that are there, if you have two laptops, you're going to need to shut one down. And we're going to start with Bingham Farms. Bob Harbron, if you can unmute your line, and if you have questions from your audience that you would like to present. Angela, if you can make sure Bingham Farms is unmuted and the rest of the offices are muted, that would be great.
Everybody's unmuted on here that I have.
Okay, then let's try Grand Rapids.
Diane, I don't know if you can hear us.
Yep, we can.
Oh,
Great.
good, good. All right, anybody here have any questions for Jeff? Not at the moment, Diane.
Okay, George, Pittsburgh.
I just wondered how many different programs are available for this asset management software programs. Is there just a total boatload full, or is there a couple of top performers that we should look at?
I was on mute there, sorry. Yeah, there are a multitude of programs. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's good.
There are a multitude of programs out there. And let's see, I'm trying to get to the right slide here. What I have on the screen right now is some of the most common and most established programs in the water space. I'm sure that there are some companies out there that would get angry with me for not including them on this list, and just because they're not on this list doesn't mean that they shouldn't be considered. I think it's probably safe to say that there's hundreds out there that are in the asset management space in different degrees, promising different levels or types of benefits, and are sometimes obliquely related to asset management. So it can really be a confusing market to get into. You know, when you go out with a request for proposals or for information from software vendors on a public basis, you can get lots of responses from places that you've never heard of. And so it really helps when you're doing that to have a pretty clear set of, or a clear description of what you want the software to do on a function-by-function basis. And that way you can use it as a methodical way of excluding some of the software products, make them say that they have that capability, and then prove that they have it. There's a lot of applications out there that have worked in the electric or gas space that might not have as much experience in the water space. So basically, it gets even further removed when you get to transportation and things as well. So those are just some of the considerations when looking at software packages. Another thing is the price. Just a huge range in price for both the software itself and for implementation. If you look at doing one of the implementations, don't forget about the implementation costs. If you get a quote for the software, it's just for the software, and people will be frustrated, and you won't have a good working system in the end if you don't budget for a good implementation. So that's key. And I don't have it organized by price here, but generally like the SAP, Oracle, Maximo, even down to Infor, those are generally like in the higher price range, where Infor might be a little bit less than the SAPs and Oracles, but it's still a more comprehensive enterprise asset management system. Lucidity and CityWorks are great choices, for public utilities. They both have a long history and a good user group in water and sewer sector as well. And then Excel has been gaining functionality. A lot of people know it as like a permits system, but it's really expanded into asset management. It has some good features. And then there's like lower end would be things like Antero and ViewWorks, which can be really perfectly adequate, especially for smaller utilities. So there's a certain case to be made for some of the smaller systems and not spending a ton of money on something that's more sophisticated than what you need. So that might have been more than you wanted to hear, or yeah, did that answer your question? Yep.
I've got a follow-up. You said something, electrical
Go ahead.
systems and water, wastewater. Is the water and wastewater industry easily grouped into these packages, or are these all the ones we're looking at? Are they all more water-based, potable water-based?
These all have water packages. Some of them have a little bit less history in the water sector than others. And when you look at the history of some of these systems, it often comes down to a linear system, like GIS-based and mapping-based for out in the networks, versus a facility system that's more geared for hierarchical structures and different types of assets and different types of maintenance on a more sophisticated basis. And so those types of systems would especially be like the SAP and IBM and Oracle, which have a rich history in, well, full enterprise, citywide applications, industry applications, electrical power plant applications. So they, in a way, they are less common as full water system implementations and really draw on a richer electrical history. So the user groups aren't as strong in my experience on those fronts. I've seen a lot of frustration. Maximo is deployed, for example, in a lot of water and wastewater systems, but it's all over the map in terms of the quality of the deployment. I know some utilities are very happy with it, but there isn't a ready-made water system structure. It had to be built, and that's a frustration for some of the other utilities that have gone with it because it wasn't ready to run off the shelf, and so it has limited functionality. A lot of the others are much more readily compatible or just sufficiently generic to work pretty smoothly in the water system. And again, Lucity and CityWorks are two that we use regularly and have they have a good user group in the water and sewer sector, so I don't have a problem touting them.
There's no questions in Pittsburgh?
No, thank you. That was a good answer.
Okay, thank you. Toledo office? I know Russ has some questions. Toledo? Are you there? Hello? Okay, while Toledo maybe finds their unmute button, we'll go ahead and let the folks in Akron ask questions.
Do you have any information about the capital planning prioritization that was performed in Tulsa?
You said you'd like to get some information about it? Is that,
Sure.
I missed the beginning of it, I'm sorry.
I asked if you had any information about the Tulsa's capital planning prioritization process.
Absolutely. I have probably more than you want to see. Is there anything in particular
What did
that
they
you'd
do?
like to see? I think I could talk about the details. Yes, they do have weights behind it here. I'm going to find a screen to open up here to talk from. It's not just your typical weighting, though, of a normal consequence of failure and likelihood of failure, but there is a weighting process that comes out essentially in these graphs. So what we have is a weighting for each project. We identify a financial benefit from the financial template spreadsheet, basically in terms of life cycle costs and the benefits financially. And then there's a regulatory benefit or risk, a safety benefit or risk, and a customer service benefit or risk. Each of those has sub-elements that get weighted up to provide that final score. And then each of these has a weighting where I don't remember the exact weightings, but I think financial was about 45% of the total score, and then regulatory, safety, and customer service were relatively balanced for the remainder of it, with about 15 to 20% each. That is something that is very easy to change and then reprioritize based on those things. But what we found in sensitivity for Tulsa was it wasn't terribly sensitive unless we really outsized the regulatory and environmental relative to everything else. One thing that happened was we ended up deferring, and it still ended up being within the horizon, but the consent decree projects for sewer system rehabilitation were not found to be super risky or super beneficial from a financial perspective. So the biggest change was in those if we increased the weighting of the regulatory and environmental, but just to meet the regulatory deadlines. But we do always have the overriding factors of there's a consent decree deadline to have this project in place by 2018. That's fixed, and we can't defer it beyond that. But we aren't going to do it until 2018. You know. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. We just did a more of a social, economic, and financial benefit scoring, and I was just curious what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Question on your Winston-Salem slide. You actually showed a map, I'm assuming was based on PACP conditional assessments. And I'm more familiar where you just give an overall ranking, but it looks like you actually map
yes.
the location of the defects within each segment. Can you change that if you're just looking for a certain type of defect? If you're just looking for cracks, just map the cracks?
Yes.
It was slide 19.
Absolutely, and that's the beautiful thing about it. You can actually map it both ways. Thank you. I was just trying to find it and talk at the same time. Basically, what the database behind it is actually two separate data tables. So when you're logging the defects in CCTV, you're generally logging a circumferential crack or whatever it is and assigning the severity to it at 6.9 feet along the line between manhole 1 and manhole 2. That's the basis for getting all these triangles. And so in the table, each triangle does have a type and a severity associated with it. So in the GIS, it's very easy to color code it. Filter out the types that you aren't interested in, or color code it by severity as well. And actually, these are color-coded by severity. I probably could have picked a better screenshot to show more differentiation. But so you can see each one. You can color code them. The other thing that you can do is in the other data table, you can have a summary score for the pipe. Whether it's the PACP summary, the quick structural rating, the quick maintenance rating, or if you have your own independent way of summarizing the results that you like better, you can take that score and color code the whole pipe based on that. That's what you usually use for the rehab and replacement prioritization, is that summary score. But it's still really helpful to see each individual defect from an operational perspective. And that way you can also track the defects over time if you do repeat inspections.
Follow-up question, which package were they using, which software were they using to do that?
At the time, they were using Hansen. They're in the process. Well, they haven't started yet, but they're going to be switching over to CityWorks. But they primarily did this within the GIS environment, and drawing on Hansen data. And I want to say they had Granite XP for the sewer software, but I forget actually which one they were using.
Thank you.
Yep.
We're going to go back to Toledo.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Diane, this was Russ. The question before kind of answered what my question was. Other than the triangles and stuff, I assume that once you can focus in on them, that you can pull up a picture and see how bad the defect was. And that's because that relates back to the film. Is that correct?
That's right, actually. You know, that's a matter of having all the videos available and things. So Winston-Salem might have that implemented at this point, but they didn't fairly recently. But for Memphis, for example, we are doing that, and you can actually pull up the whole video. There's a snapshot of each defect that's automatically referenced based on the time in the video. So it's really just the videos that are stored on the server, and then they're referenced by assigning a time of footage to it. And the nice thing about that system, the way we've done it there, is we've set up a specification so that all contractors that are doing condition assessments or CCTV work in Memphis have to abide by the data structure, so that it actually works with some automated tools for quality control checking, and it's readily importable into the database. So it's a very smooth process once you get the specification set, and there's a little bit of a learning period with each of the contractors, but they ended up liking the process because they get paid faster, because it's easier to do QA/QC on their work. So again, that's a little bit of a win-win, and it just makes the process a little more efficient.
More questions on Toledo?
I just had one more question. On page 27 of the presentation, you go over the Tulsa capital planning process. Once you get to the final step, the rate modeling, and it goes to whatever board or council or whatever, what if the rates that's required can't be developed to that level, that high level? Is there, do you go back and just nix some of the projects based on a risk analysis that you previously did?
That's right.
How does that work?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm sorry I interrupted you there. But yes, that's exactly right. It becomes an iterative process between rate modeling and CIP review. And the nice thing about having that is it provides a mechanism for the engineering services director and the water and sewer director to say, okay, we can not increase rates, but you can see the impact on the increased risk by deferring these projects further. So this is not the optimal program anymore, but it's the optimal program for the money that you're giving us.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mm-hmm.
In Toledo?
We get some issues trying to use a program that seems to be more pointed towards networks like collection systems and distribution systems, and does that same program does not seem to lend itself to treatment works, be it water treatment or wastewater treatment. We're not finding
yes.
They have two different focuses.
Yes, and I'm not talking about any one given software package. So I completely agree with you that a number of different software packages and approaches are better for treatment or network based assets. And generally treatment assets have a lot more complex in the way of mechanical moving parts and things like that, and the way you roll up costs is different. So I total agreement that it's done a little bit differently. The concepts of an asset management program, though, still apply readily to both. So I'd say most of the stuff in my presentation is, well, actually all of it we've applied to both treatment and to collection and distribution systems. Tulsa's, for example, is citywide, or I mean utility or authority-wide, meaning it has water distribution, wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, and water treatment, as well as raw water supply.
What program are
So
they?
it's applicable. The hardest part about doing it actually is getting the apples to apples comparison. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What system are they using? What program?
It sounded like you had a follow-up.
Just wondering what.
That's the system where. Okay, yeah, we might have a little bit of a delay. The software that they use is they're implementing Lucity on an authority-wide basis right now, but that's still in process of implementation. So they actually still have work order systems that are different between treatment and collection and distribution, but actually the functionality across the board is going to improve for them when they go to Lucity.
Thank you.
So Lucity then will manage both the network and the plants, or you'll use that for the.
That's right.
The tracking. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And in terms of the plants, Lucity's stronger on the network side. You know, they originally came out of the GIS background, but over the recent years they've been increasing the capabilities on the plant side, so that they're pretty good now. Over time, though, Tulsa is going to want to move to like an RCM, the reliability-centered maintenance approach. It might not be the full formal RCM2 approach, but so we're taking extra care to set up a hierarchy that's consistent with an RCM approach. Lucity's going to help them get a lot of the underlying data that they need, but it doesn't actually help a lot with the actual analysis to support RCM. So when they get to that level, they'll have to be pulling data out to whether it's a spreadsheet or another program to review some of the performance history of the assets. So that it's really kind of when you get to that sophisticated level when you start to see the real limitations in Lucity. That's still a number of years out, and meanwhile they're building a database.
Okay, I think that was it for Toledo.
Okay, thank you. I just want to jump back, Ben, real quick. Grand Rapids, did you guys have any questions as a follow-up to anything? Or Pittsburgh? Okay. Well, this doesn't have to be the end of your questions, so if any of the participants have questions that you have an interest in or triggers later on, feel free to send the questions to your facilitator in your office, and we can go ahead and get that response and to Jeff as the presenter, and we'll get a question back to you. We do appreciate you participating and coming to our first session out of the quarterly sessions. Our next one is going to be on June 17th, and it's going to be actually a combination of water loss and our smart system and infrastructure. It's a new program that Black Veatch has developed in response to the needs of our clients. That's going to be talked about by Andrew Chase and Holly in combination with Jeff Neiman. That'll be happening again, like I said, on June 17th. We'll have an email that will go out to everybody letting you know when you can register, and then a follow-up on the confirmations. And if there's any final questions, I'll go around real quick. We're up to Seth, Grand Rapids, anything? Pittsburgh?
Oh, we're all set. Thank you.
Okay. Toledo?
We're all good. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we greatly appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
You too, Diane.
Thanks, everyone.